If you've been watching this channel for any amount of time, you know that there are three main ways that you can get to Alaska. You can fly, you can take the Alaskan, or you can take the ferry system. And actually taking the ferry system actually is just not really an option anymore. My name is Jamin Goecker. I'm an associate real estate broker in the state of Alaska, and my mission is to help you to build an intentional and significant legacy for yourself and your family by coaching in real estate. And today we're going to be talking about how the ferry system for getting to Alaska really has kind of gotten knocked out of the equation for most people, and what variables really has led to this, and what exactly it is you should do with this information. Before we get started though, give this video a like, subscribe, and let's jump right into it. Now, there are two vessels in the Alaska Marine Highway fleet that can actually make it all the way from Bellingham all the way up to Valdez or Whittier, which are the kind of dropping off points for most people if they're looking at actually using the ferry system and getting to South Central Alaska. And these two vessels, unfortunately, are both out of commission at the moment. The first one is the Kennicott, and that is actually in the Vigor shipyard over in Ketchikan, and it's actually being repaired right at the moment, being updated, some stuff, because it's kind of an older vessel, and projected having that work completed November 17th, if I recall correctly. Now, what that means then is the only thing we're waiting on is to be able to go hire the crew that's required to man the Kennicott vessel, because that's something that might be a little bit more challenging. We'll talk more about why that could be in just a bit here. The second vessel is the Matanuska. Now, the Matanuska, it's also an older vessel, and it's also one that can go make that entire trip from Bellingham over to Valdez or Whittier, and unfortunately this one is just laid up at the moment. They started doing some annual servicing and some upgrades to it, and they found like a bunch of asbestos that was just become very friable. That makes it obviously impossible to go do a whole lot of work on it without looking into it further. And as they were looking into it, they started finding more steel and a lot of other stuff that's starting to corrode on it. Now the bill to repair it is now approximately $8 to $10 million is what they're saying additionally. So $8 to $10 million additionally to go and do all that work. It can be done where there's a lot of money, but that does start putting question marks on the Matanuska as to whether or not it's going to be put back into circulation, just with the price tag that is entailed with it. So the Kennicott is projected to potentially be back up and going here, maybe around the end of the year. Just depends how quickly they're able to get the crew in there. Matanuska, I would plan on that just being out for the count indefinitely till you hear otherwise. But let's go and talk about some variables though that are players in this equation that we're trying to get it figured out. One thing you're probably thinking is, hey, how come, we have all these other vessels in the Alaska Marine Highway system? Why don't we just take one of those and have them make obviously smaller vessels, but have them do more frequent trips, just going to and from Bellingham, up and down the ferry system? The problem is not all vessels are rated to be able to travel internationally. So that's one of the big reasons. Another reason is that a lot of these vessels might not be compatible with the docking systems, with the terminals that they would have to be going to. And for that reason, if they're not compatible, then obviously you can't have the vessel go to that terminal. So that's another limiting factor right now that's cutting down our options. Another big variable that kind of alluded to a couple times already, but ferry vessels are just getting older. I think the Matanuska was built back in the 1990s, if I recall correctly. So, it is starting to get up there in age, and even with the annual servicing and everything, that does start to add up. You start getting older vessels and that point of diminishing return where it's like, should we repair this, or should we just see if we can buy a whole new vessel, starts to come into play. Now also, we have seen a pretty significant drop in the number of passengers that are using the Alaska Marine Highway system in the past couple of years. Back in 2019, there was about 250,000 passengers on the Alaska Marine Highway, and for 2021, it actually dropped down to right around 38,000, which not a huge surprise. We did see a pretty big dip during COVID, understandably, but also it's kind of been on the decline for a while, and I'm just not sure we're going to get back to 120 passengers anytime soon. And as you can see with those numbers, and the population of Alaska is only 733,000. It's very important for Southeast Alaska because there's really no other way for them to get goods or anything, because they're not connected by road, and it's very expensive to fly stuff in. So the ferry system is do or die for them. But for the rest of the state, it's pretty important as well, because that's how a lot of people get here as well. Now, The reason that this is important is because if the ferry system is out, like you can no longer take the ferry to get up to Alaska, the only option is to get through Canada. And my concern there is what happens if Canada suddenly shuts off their border because we have another pandemic, if you would, start going around. Then at that point, I really could see that become an issue for some people. That's the reason we're paying such close attention to this. Now, another variable, real quick, just circling back here, another variable that's making it very difficult to get these ships up and going, or these vessels, is the hiring process. Like I said before, the Kennecott should be ready to go in a couple months here. The only issue is going to be hiring a crew. Now, why is it so difficult to hire a crew? Well, there's a lot of requirements, certifications, and everything that go along with it, but also I think really what's hurting them is the ferry system, Alaskan Marine Highway System, joined in with a strike a couple of years ago with the government, and they were insisting that, we should be paid this, and the government did not agree with that. So the ferry system, I think it was actually illegally, went on strike, as that's 100% not in their contract that you can completely hold Southeast Alaska hostage, so you can go on a strike. And the government called their bluff. They weren't going to give any ground, and unfortunately those new members to the unions were the first ones to start losing their jobs, and so it becomes a lot more challenging at that point to convince people to jump on and become crew members when they're like, hey, so I know so-and-so that was a member on this crew, and you guys totally joined a strike that you couldn't win and didn't get anything from it, and my buddy lost his job, so thanks, but no thanks. I'm not hopping on for that. And so I think that's part of the reason that we're seeing it would be a challenge for them to hire a crew right at the moment. Now, if you're getting any value from this whole discussion about the logistics, then do feel free to hop on to the Alaskan Journey podcast, where I talk with people who have recently made the move up here to Alaska, and it'll kind of give you a good feel for what's going on in the Alaskan and on the ferry system as well. So do make sure to go take a listen to that, and link for the Alaskan Journey podcast is going to be in the description section down below. And let's go and finish up today's video. Now, the ferry system isn't completely incapacitated. They can still get you Southeast Alaska. They can still get you to like the Aleutian Islands and a bunch of other places. They can still technically take you to Haines, and then you can just hop off, but you're still going to have to go through Canada from doing that, which it's pretty obnoxious because it's not very long. You have to drive through Canada, but still going through Canada. And for some people, that may or may not be a good option for whatever reason. That's a concern. There's talk about federal funding coming in and being able to get some newer vessels, work on some terminals. But realistically, it's not going to be like next season that we're going to see that stuff actually having an impact. And even then, it's still going to take a couple of years for like new equipment or terminals or construction to begin. So as you can see, it's probably best that we just start planning as though using the ferry going from Bellingham up to Valdez or Whittier is just not really a viable option at the moment. Maybe a Kennecott will come through, but I kind of doubt it really at this stage. So the best thing I can say is start planning as though it's not there, and start planning to just use the Alaskan highway probably sooner rather than later. And the reason that I say that is we don't know for sure what there is a new pandemic that starts that the Canadians are going to shut off their border, or if there's going to be a lot of other rules and restrictions about the time and a bunch of other issues. So if you can possibly avoid it, I'd say probably get across sooner rather than later, because you just don't know how everything's going to be going here. And this might be overreacting, just kind of based on how I saw the Canadians handle the last pandemic that we had. But that if I were in your position, I had the option of being able to move sooner rather than later, at least moving all my stuff, I'd probably err on the side of caution just to be on the safe side. But, that really is just my perspective, and you can feel free to do whatever it is that you want, and you will. So that's just my 2 cents, though. At the end of the day, everybody should downsize as best as they possibly can, and as a very last resort, consider just hiring a moving company to move all that stuff for you, and then you can just fly here yourself, which is going to make things significantly easier. So I sure hope this has been useful. If you have any new updates on how the progress and everything is coming along, or if you have any further insights as to what's going on with the updating and the work on the Kennecott and the Matanuska, feel free to drop them down below. I'm always looking for people who have more insider information. So do feel free to drop those below so we can stay updated. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.